Owner of Something or Other Publishing, Wade Franson, is the host of Created in the Image of God, a series that examines the role of religion in society, from messianic returns to the emotive responses transmitted through our culture. Wade fearlessly addresses reality claims from all directions, objectively exploring their compatibility with Holy Scripture. Joining him is Daniel Sanderson, CEO of Planksip, an international philosophy and cultural media outlet, helping emerging thought leaders with personal branding by co-creating organic content. Tonight's episode, Theology and Human Dignity, with Roy Leathem.
Roy Leathem. Well, that's a name that I love. Let me explain to the audience why I love that name. When I get to come into the show week in, week out, introducing the guests, but we're in for a real treat today. Roy Leathem. Roy's my uncle, and and so as we get to explore Roy's childhood, it's going to be through the lens of something that I'm very vested in, right? To learn about your childhood, your formative years. And I want to share with the audience, a lot of times I think to myself, how would I stage something? How do I bring it up and present it to people? And when I'm in doubt, I find the easiest thing to do is just the truthful approach is very, very effective. And so for audience members, there's a bit of a backstory with me. I was adopted, and I actually never met my maternal side of my family until I was 22. And lo and behold, this person, this guest that we have on the other side of the studio here, Roy Leathem, is on my maternal side. Roy's my uncle, and I never met Roy until I was 22 years old, and what a blessing it was to meet the entire family. So I'm very happy and blessed to have Roy in the studio, and I'm sure everybody's going to really enjoy what Roy has to say. So on that, there's a little bit of a kind of a scripted unfolding in the show, and what we like to give audience members and listeners that are tuning into this show is we want to find out a little bit about Roy and your childhood. Yeah. So maybe explain where you grew up, how many brothers and sisters you have, and where you fit into that mix. And then as it unfolds, move into how theology started to seep into the to the identity that is sitting in front of us right now.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that introduction. And hello to all the audience and online friends. That's right. I only became aware of the fact that I had a nephew, much later in my life. And it really was a surprise that we had so much in common, and, we enjoyed each other's company. So, I mean, the history part of it, came from seemed like normal family. Hardworking dad and mom. Mom was an artist. Dad worked for the gas company. I was the youngest of three. My sister was the oldest. My brother, 2 years older than me, and she was 2 years older than my brother. So pretty close together in that sense. But I was way different, and I'm not sure why, but had a lot of problems, and started very, very early. And first day of school, I was kicked out, and that started a war with the institution of education for me. Never passed a single grade of school. Always the class clown, always the guy getting kicked out, getting into fights. And it just got worse. I was in trouble with the law from a very early age, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. sneaking out of the house, breaking into places, acts of destruction. I can't go into it. It was like a non-stop drama. And oh my goodness, my poor dad, mom, um, they were torn to pieces. The whole family, I think, was torn to pieces. But um, it was so bad, actually, um, that, I mean, I lost pretty well every friend I ever had. Um, Certainly the connection with my brother and sister, my father, who was just could not believe I was doing the things I was doing. And um, he used to always say, well, why did you steal that car? Why did you paint on the side of that house? Why did you derail this train? Why did you try to burn down a church? I mean, I'm 10, 11, 12 years old. I was making bombs. Um, and I would just shrug my shoulders and say, I don't know. And it brought me to a place of real shame. And I still didn't really know the answer, but I knew that there was something weird going on. And it really wasn't until I started getting into social work studies much later on in my life, and then started working as a mental health worker, that I realized that, oh, wait a minute, I've seen this before. This is a child diagnosis, or this is ADHD, or this is a borderline personality disorder. And I guess I had a few, but ADHD was a big one. And that led to depression, anxiety. And I was so compelled to figure out what the heck went on with me that I spent the rest of my life working with people with mental illness, people with histories of problems like that. A lot of it touched onto addiction. A lot of it touched onto crime. Um, and and I became a social worker and an outreach worker. I call it a social worker. I was probably a mental health worker would be the proper name for it, and an outreach worker for close to 40 years. And I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with me. But um, I've learned to accept myself. I've learned to realize that things happen for a reason. And I've worked with a lot of families that have children that have gone through similar experiences. So it's been a real eye opener for me to have experienced it firsthand, and then be able to apply myself in the field. Um, and that's kind of like where the secular part of my training and experience took me. But the theology side of it was a whole different sort of things. It was sort of growing parallel. I remember being a very young child playing with my dad's camera. It was one of the really old Kodaks with the bellows that would fold in and out, and it had a little sort of a spring thing on it that you could push, and it was a timer, and it would make this funny zipping noise for about 5 seconds, and it would click, take your picture. And so I was off playing with that in the bedroom, and I guess I was no more than about 5 or 6 years old. And I went to click it, and there was nothing. It didn't buzz. It was jammed. And the fear that came over me was, oh my God, I've broken the camera. My dad is going to be so mad at me. And I just dropped down on my knees, and I just said, oh God, please put my hands together. I said, please fix this camera. And at that moment, I hear bzzz, play. And I think I used to see, those old black and whites around Christmas of Christ being resurrected, or stories of the resurrection, or that sort of thing. And I guess maybe that was maybe in the very recesses of my mind, my memory somehow. But I certainly had a sense of there being a God. And it was just a never-ending tale of stories and testimonies and experiences of things that, I couldn't even begin to tell you. I just call them like little miracles. But it got to be so coincidental that at one point I just said, okay, I believe this. And I guess I was about 20 at the time, but I, had started quite a bit of study in philosophy and mysticism and Buddhism and a lot of different things. So it was just kind of like a coming to a head, I guess, around 20, I suppose.
So I have a couple questions about, in retrospect or looking back on your life. Can you say that you've been happier, better adjusted to society? You flourish more when that relationship with your spiritual side, I guess. Would you say that that's when Roy is more authentic, or you're more connected and more
Yeah,
do you see your life going in a pattern or a rhythm like that?
absolutely. I would have never believed it had there not been such physical proof. But I was writing my mother letters. She was in Montreal at the time and left when I was about 16. And I was in a lot of trouble. I was living on the streets. I was, trying to survive. I was hustling pool. I was just, a lot of different things. Actually, 16 was when I was supposed to be going straight. But the writing was just off the wall. Like my mom brought a great big binder of all my letters back and showed me, and I could hardly look at it because it was one thing very messy, scrambled. The ideas were just like no basis in reality, and just changing subjects continuously, and really, like I say, it just mind numbing. Like it just had no interest. Anybody would just look at it and go, "Okay, that's like garbage." And to make a long story short, when I was about 26 years old, I was hitchhiking to Vancouver. I had my guitar. I was playing songs, living on the street. And I was asked to come to a church. One day I was practicing just to go to a liquor store and make some money. And it was starting to rain. And I thought, you know what, maybe I can get a free meal there, better than standing in the rain and getting wet. And so I went. And it was just like, okay, we had a vision about you, and we think that you're like special, and you should stay here and live here and be a music minister. And I'm just going like, oh wow, like okay. And then I wrote some letters. I mean, I can't even go into explaining the kind of real emotional changes, because while they were happening, I kind of really wasn't aware of it. But there was a lot of things happening to me that when I look back on, I go, wow. And so here I am living in a church, instantly became a music minister and a Thursday night preacher, working in the missions in downtown Vancouver. And, and I'm writing these letters. And when I saw all the letters put together, and in the last chapter of it, these letters that took place while I was living in this church, and sort of I was converted at that time, they were like so rational, so balanced, like I had this great foundation. I was speaking with like confidence, and I was happy, and I'd come to a place of peace, because it seemed like my entire life I was searching for something, and it was driving me crazy. Like
Literally
I saw
driving
the
you crazy.
educational system to be a farce.
Yeah.
Like they tagged me right away. Like this kid's a loser. Like this kid's like, he's just a bad person. And I thought, fine, you know what? I don't need you either. And I was at war. And that conflict, that stress, that it just really does things with your mind, and especially if you're, attention deficit. I couldn't pass a single grade in school. And then I went to theology school, and I graduated with like A, straight A's I was on. the deeds list. I was like considered the Bible answer man by some of the students. They were like, Roy knows that sort of thing, because it's just like so into it, so motivated.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I never had before. To have the interest, to be focused,
Hmm.
and I've never failed anything I've put my hand to since then. It's that there's no failing for me. I'll never give up.
Hmm.
And so, from not being able to keep a job, never passing a grade in school, I became very successful in the field of social work and just continued on. I tried my hand at the pastoral music ministry and different things, but I found it hard to be a part of the church system. I kind of like to do coffee houses, something on the side. They call that para-ministry. It's sort of like not in the church, but kind of sort of similar, just
Hmm.
more of an outreach.
Yeah, yeah. That's really interesting. I mean, as you paint that picture, I think to myself, um, that makes the choice very black and white. I mean, it's just the transformation is so. I've listened to testimony and people explain about the process and when they knew, and that whether they found Jesus or they became one with their faith, right? I guess that'd be the
Yeah.
way to describe it. And your particular case, I think maybe there actually, now that I think of it, I think maybe Wade has some parallels there with
Hmm.
his,
Hmm.
which we're in typical fashion. We're going to, in about 5 minutes or so, we're gonna go to
Right.
a commercial break and stuff. Wade will come back, and you guys will have a lot to talk about, I'm sure. Um, I was curious about the secular nature of your social work, and did you find that working from um, the secular side of social work, that you were bound or limited with how you could express religion?
Mm. No, no, because love is unbound. Um, and really, religion in its purest sense is loving God and loving your neighbor. Um, that's it. Um, and you don't love people or try to help people. Well, I should say that you can love people with an agenda. Well, I'm getting paid to do this, so I'll put on a happy face and go through those motions, to do the paperwork and move you on to the next stage, kind of thing, right? But for me, it was no. I need to focus in on this person. I need to understand who they are, and I need to connect. And in that connection, there's something spiritual that happens, that they understand that they're being understood and that
Mm.
someone cares. And you can, at that a certain moment, you can even feel like if spirituality could make a sound, it'd be like a deep breath coming out of them, and all of a sudden feeling peaceful and relaxed and going, wow, somebody cares or someone is understanding me. And it's like a connection. It's almost like a oneness for a second. And that to me was spirituality.
Mm.
So the two are the same to me. It's just caring, just
Mm.
finding out what the needs are.
That's beautiful, and I think that's I have you over. We've had dinners, and you brought your guitar out, and we certainly don't do that enough.
I
But
know, I miss
for
those
for the
days.
audience sake, and for the way the program unfolds, we're going to. I could keep doing this all for many hours, as you know, but we're going to go to a commercial break. We're going to actually we're actually going to show Wade's book, because you don't have a book yet. I mean, you're thinking about writing a book, is from what I understand. Isn't that right,
I've
Roy?
been writing. I've been doing a little bit of writing here and there, with work and family life and all the things that happen. You come home, you watch some TV, eat a meal, go to bed, get up, and I just never really had the time. But I started several books. One of them is a book on prophecy. I call it The Lost.
Hmm.
And speaking of the Lost 10 Tribes. And then a few other books that are a little bit more, I'd say, focused on, well, a lot of it has to do with mental health issues, and how we perceive the world. How there's always a generation, that's breaking through the barriers and challenging the system. And it's such a beautiful thing to see that. So that's kind of another case study I've done. And then there's the science fiction I'm writing, which I've been doing a lot more writing in that, just because I enjoy science
Well,
fiction.
let me ask you, Roy, on this. Do you know which one's going to come first? Because there's three. You're
Yeah,
working on, right? Do you know which?
yeah.
Do you know right now which one's going to be the first one to be finished, or you don't know?
Well, I think Wade told me it has to be the book on prophecies.
Well, he's prophetic. He's just got this
Yeah,
talent, right?
that's right.
Okay, well, we're Wade doesn't like when I pump him up and stuff like that, but we're going to hear from. It's going to be his book that we're going to play right now. I want to remind everybody to put your comments in the chat section. Engage with Roy, ask questions. There's going to be a book given away at the end. This happens every show. So Roy, just make a mental note when you've written your book. What's going to happen is that you're going to be able to come on the show again, and you're going to be able to give a copy away to the one lucky listener and commenter that engages with your book and with what you have to say. So we're going to go to commercial break now, and when we come back, we've got Wade Franson in studio with Roy Leathem, and I want to thank everybody again for tuning in, and here we go.
What do divorce, kidnapping, ancient prophecies, and the collapse of the Soviet Union have in common with the music of the Beatles? These are all elements of author Wade Franson's traumatic autobiographical journey, recorded in his best-selling book, The People of the Sign. He effortlessly weaves these elements together, proving once and for all that truth really is far, far stranger than fiction. Order your copy now on Amazon or by emailing orders@soupllc.com.
And you can also order it with that QR code. Well, wow, Roy, I was so interested from back behind the curtain in what you had to share about your upbringing. And Dan is absolutely correct. We have a lot in common. To start with, you're up north, just in the area of Surrey, BC, Langley, I think you called it. And Surrey is where my parents met. And as you were describing your antics, I thought, wow, you must have been running around with my cousins, Calvin and Rod, because those are the kind of things they were doing too. And I was up to my own antics as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So yeah, we have a lot in common, and that's part of the reason too why I ended up going down the path of theology. So,
Mm-hmm.
so much there to dive into. One question though, did you have formal study into theology at a university? I think you might have mentioned that, but I wanted to dig into that a little bit more.
Yes, I took first of all a diploma in theology, or I guess Bible studies, uh, through Life Bible College, which was connected to the oh oh God, Amy Semple McPherson, Foursquare Church.
Yep.
And then they got the ability to do degrees, which I followed through after that. And at the end of that time, I finally figured out what life meant, the LIFE, an acronym, which is living in financial embarrassment.
Yeah, so you weren't going to do much with that theology degree, and then you had to get to work. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I guess I really wanted to go and be a pastor, because my heart was caring for people, and I felt that this was the right means and the right tools. But I have to say, I got sort of a bad feeling about the politics of the institution. And I don't want to put blame down on any church or anything like that, but it just was not me. The money thing got very difficult for me to work with. I tended to like to work with people that were very poor, and everything was given free. Spaces were donated to, like working in the missions. I like that. And then that turned into doing coffee houses. But they were really laid back. It was a very soft sell. I wasn't preaching or anything like that. It's just, playing some very soft Christian pop and a lot of free food, and people would come in. It was really nice, cozy environment. And it was just an environment to kind of meet people and connect, right?
But I do really like that we got to learn that there was these very early experiences, right? Like with the camera and the whirring and the click. I thought, well, when you said that the sound of spirituality, maybe that's what it is, right? It's that whirring and that click. But so let's say for a moment that was a miracle. For the sake of discussion, let's say God heard your prayer at 5 and he fixed the camera. Why would he have done that? Why would he have done that? Is it so that you could sit here and tell that story, and thereby somebody else would be convinced that didn't have faith? Do you think that was the reason? Or was there a different reason?
Well, I don't think he wanted me to get into trouble. I asked him.
In other words, it was personal for you. The intent wasn't that you would sit here at your ripe old age of 29 and tell this story and the masses would be converted because they believed in the miracle.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty basic. Like I don't get off on, two of those like what could be, or a grand testimonies of, well, my story really changed people's lives. Like to me, it's just, I just look at the very basic fact that it happened.
Right.
And
but that's my point. It changed your life. You still remember it. So even if you can't trace exactly how that little miracle, that little proof that you had a heavenly Father, even though you couldn't trace the trajectory and the outcome, you couldn't plot it on a graph scientifically such that the doubters and the skeptics would buy it. It was for you. It was a loving being giving you a gentle encouragement that was very powerful and meaningful to you at that time, because your prayer was sincere.
Yeah.
Back when I was a minister, there was this common sort of old, you've heard of dad jokes, right? This is a minister's joke, right? Well, what is the best position for prayer? Well, it's when you're hanging upside down in a well, obviously.
Yeah.
Right. So it was a sincere prayer. You got an answer, and it was important to you at that time. It wasn't for anybody else. It's nobody else's business. It's great that you share it, and I'm not saying you're trying to share it in any wrong way. It's great that you're sharing it, and I'm grateful that you shared it. But it was for you, not for me.
Yeah.
And I'm encouraged by it too, because I can see that the Father that I have and that I know has also helped you and loves you as well. And you and I were talking a little bit about the Bible earlier, and all that sibling rivalry, right? Every single Bible story from Genesis has to do with sibling rivalry and Cain and Abel, you know.
Isn't that something though, eh? Yeah.
And yet here you and I are sharing this story, and my heart is just warmed by the fact that God loves you just like he loves me, right? But
Yeah.
but so you had trouble with your brother and sister because of, you know, unpack that a little bit more.
Well, it was mostly estrangement, I'd say, than anything. You know, I was kind of on my own. I mean, I guess we all were. You know, my brother had lots of friends, I think, and same with my sister. And I had like maybe one or two friends, but you know, I was always getting them in trouble. And then I wasn't allowed to play with them anymore.
You were the person that nobody else's parents would let their kids play with you.
That's right. That's right. And I'd still find a way to do it. You know, I don't know why.
Well,
There's
they
like
probably
this.
wanted to play with you because it was fun playing with you.
That's right. Yeah. Wow, we stole a car.
Yeah, I had a friend like that too. Actually, a couple. Every time we got together, we were in trouble.
Mhm,
Yeah, I was
mhm.
also in trouble with the law when I applied to study at my church's university, and you had to be interviewed by the minister. The minister said, "I've only got one question for you, right? You had to, your minister had to give a recommendation, or you wouldn't get in."
Right.
And he said, "I just got one question for you." Like, okay. He said, "I've heard some rumors about you, your cars, the police. Are you applying to ambassador?" That was the name of the university. "Are you applying to ambassador to escape from the law up here in Alaska?" I could honestly say no. I mean, that's a side benefit, but that's not why I'm doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess I said no, but I'm like, well, there went my chances, right? I mean, if that's the question that he asks, you know, there's no way I'm getting in. Um,
Yeah.
but I was put on an alternate list, and I got a call 4 days before. I didn't get accepted in the spring, and they said I'd failed to submit my registration fee or something, and I got really angry because I'm like, just tell me you don't want me, but don't give me a lie, right? And so then I got a call 4 days before the spring semester started and said, if you can be here in 4 days, you know, there's a spot for you. And I found out they had expelled like 20 students over spring break because they went back home and did things they shouldn't have and that didn't represent the university well. And so because of them, I got in. And like you, it changed my life. It changed my life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I love that you shared when Dan asked you, so, you know, did your life trajectory become more positive? I love that you stepped into a third person view and said, well, yeah, looking back at these letters, right?
Mhm.
Objective proof.
Yeah.
So I do sense that you're not here trying to sell anybody or convince anybody, but you're trying to look at things objectively, both in terms of the world and yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, reality is truth, you know, and nothing will teach you more than looking at reality and dealing with it. Um,
Well, and so I've often said that there are two great books of Revelation. There's the book of Revelation with an R, and I think this may well be a Baha'i teaching. I'm a Baha'i, full disclosure for you in the audience. I think this may be a Baha'i teaching, and that may be where I got it from. But there are two books. One is the book of Revelation, which is the written word, the word of God. And then there's the book of creation, right? The creation itself is God's revelation.
Right.
And we're only beginning to learn to read that second book. And that revelation is in a way more powerful. I don't want to diminish God's power and the direct power of the word, but his creation is the revelation of who and what he is.
Oh, that's so true. I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Yeah.
And so your point about it's reality, right? Exploring reality. So was that a factor that you were aware of your own state that when you stopped by that church and when they poured out their love to you and welcomed you and you
Yeah.
responded, that your reality changed and you recognized it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say it would have had to happen over maybe a period of a month before I was like fully aware of what was going on. Um, I'll just tell you a little story. I was playing my guitar down in Granville prior to that meeting with the lady in the park, and I guess I had about 60 songs, covers I was playing, Beatles, Who, Rolling Stones, some Simon and Garfunkel, and I was really enjoying myself. And the guy came up to me and gave me his card. He said, "How would you like to work for me? I know about, maybe about 20, 30 bars all throughout British Columbia. You can travel around, follow them like a circuit and play. You'll make money. And I'm offering you a job." And, I was stunned. I thought, wow. I mean, the goal of any musician, well, I'd say any musician, but for me, it was like, I'm going to be making money doing this. I'm going pro.
Right.
Well, the bar scene is not the most exciting. But anyway, that's better than playing on the street, right? And so I took the card, I put it in my pocket. And then the next day I met this girl. I went to that church. Suddenly I'm living there. I'm playing gospel songs. And preaching. Then I'm going down to the missions in downtown East Side with people. Did that for like about a year. And then I was getting ready to play a sermon, Sunday service, music service. And I put the shirt on and something was sort of scratchy. There was something in there. And I pulled this card out of my pocket. And it's like, oh my God, this is the manager that wanted to hire me. I just said, well, don't need that anymore. Threw it in the garbage because it's like, no, I'm not going to be hanging around the bar. I'm not going to be drinking. I'm not going to be
different kind of spirit. But you wanted you wanted
like,
to work with the people who were open to the spirit, not the spirits.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So when you and I met the first time to talk about coming on the show, the thing that most interested me and to have you on the show was to talk about James 1 verse 7, right?
Right.
Right. Practicing religion pure and undefiled before God, as James says, which is to visit the widows and orphans in their affliction and keep oneself unspotted from the world.
Right.
But you knew early on, even as you were getting your footing and getting a spiritual foundation through the love that was poured out by these religious people, these Christians, and welcoming you into their fold and having you partake in the breaking of the bread and the sharing of the wine, the communion of sharing the word with people and sharing the good news, the gospel, in whatever way you were doing it, ministering through music and your presence. But you mentioned a couple of times in a couple of different ways you didn't really fit in to the organized part of it, right? And so you've always wanted to get at the deeper meaning underneath the, let's say, the religion itself, the cult. And I don't mean that in a negative term, but the cult, which means the practices, the rules, the laws, the behaviors that get adopted over time by the religious people. That's known as the cult in theology. You wanted to get at the spiritual truth and the reality underneath that. Tell us a little bit about whether that was conscious, unconscious, or what that kind of journey kind of means to you.
Well, it's, you can't help but notice, at least that's how I felt. You can't help but notice that there's this discrimination toward people who have difficult times, like extreme poverty, addiction, mental health issues. They may not be like really serious, but there's obvious misunderstandings and behavior problems and a lack of confidence and low self-esteem. And so, there's a certain part that the church accepts. And then there's another part where they suddenly kind of go, okay, we want to help. We want to help this person, but we also have to be careful. Like we're going to have our guard up or you know, I don't like to criticize and judge, because I think I do the same thing. And I can walk into a room and people know I'm judging them just because they can tell the way I look, my body language. And, you know, so I'll admit that I have pride and arrogance, and I'm selfish, and I don't like some people, um, especially on the road when I'm driving. You know, I really notice it a lot. So, you know, I'm going, you know, you got to change your attitude. But this is sort of the way it is with church. And I think it's normal for the church to go through these stages, these phases. Um, so I decided, you know, like, for one thing, the money, like the asking, you know, for the very poor to come in and give to the coffers, you know, put money in the hat or the plate as it goes around. And I said to myself, there's something wrong with that, because these people can't even afford to eat. And I'm not going to take their last $2 or whatever that may be. And I'm not going to be putting shame or guilt on them because they didn't. And I certainly don't blame them that they didn't. But, you know, I can see that they felt uncomfortable. And I thought, to me, oh, there's something wrong with that. And so that was the great divide. And so when I would do a coffee house, and I did it in the basement of this church where I was living, I would put out a spread of food, and people would just come in and eat. And I had some, you know, soft canned music playing. I had about maybe 2 or 3 sets I'd do, you know, short sets. But it was just about people sitting around and talking and having that time to meet people. And it grew enormously. Like, after only, oh God, 3 months, started with 3 people, my mom, my best friend, and myself. In 3 months, there was over 120 people coming in a single night. We'd had to literally clear people out to bring more people in. It was just a Monday night affair. It was once a week. And I knew that there was something going on. Actually, I got this idea when I was walking home. And I to this day, you know, I believe it was an idea that God gave me. Because working in the missions, it's the reverse. The guys come in, you know, they're tired, they're hungry, they're broken down, they're bleeding, they smell. And you lock the door so no one else can get in. They're all hungry, like they're starving, but you can't eat, not until you hear the sermon, not until you sing the song. This is what we call conditional love, right? You don't get to eat until you obey the rules. And I had a bad taste about that. So I thought, I'm going to do a coffee house. You come in free, you leave free, you eat as much as you want. I'll even pack a ton of food bags for you if you want to take it. And then you see, they see there's a difference. They see that there's genuineness, there's love there.
Right.
And the theme of the coffee house was this, that by this shall all men know you're my disciples.
That you have
Because
love
you
one
love
for another.
one
John
another.
13:35.
Yeah.
That is the sign of a true Christian. So I showed the video of my book, The People of the Sign. It's one of the themes, my search. What is the sign of a true Christian? To me, it was obvious. It was that verse. Why? Because by this shall all men know you. So that's a sign. You put a sign out on the outside of your building, right? And
Well,
it
actually,
flashes.
the inside. It was literally hanging from the rafters inside. I felt like, I'm
Yeah.
going to put it there.
Well, that's awesome. But you know, any business, right? You know, Starbucks, you know, that's where you get your coffee, or you know, the Target, you know, or you know, the shoe store, whatever it is. It's a sign outside that says who's inside.
Yeah.
By this shall all men know that you are my disciples. What's a Christian is a disciple of Jesus, somebody who follows him. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, that you have love one for another. So that second book that I wrote, The Hardness of the Heart, which I shared a picture of with you earlier, 10 years in the wilderness looking for that, looking for people who fulfilled that sign, looking for people who were true Christians, who actually practiced that, such that one could visibly see it from the outside. And it's interesting that you mentioned this conditioning thing, because every Christian church, and probably every church, I'm not picking on Christians, every Christian church believes that they have that sign because they love one another inside the church. But that's not the sign. The sign
Right.
is an independent objective. Remember, I talked about your objectivity and describing your journey by going back and looking at letters, which can objectively be shown. It's an outside, independent, objective, third-party observer that says, yep, yes, those people have love. And that was the challenge that I saw, because the people in the church, they believe they love one another, but the people outside know they're hypocrites. So,
Yeah.
it requires the people outside to recognize it. That's the sign. That's how bright the sign has to be. Don't
Yeah.
hide your light under a
Yes.
bushel.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like 5-man electrical band. Sides, everywhere the sides. We are the
Yep.
sign. We
Right.
are the sign.
Yeah, blocking out the scenery. Do this, don't do that. Can't you read the sign, right? So speaking of signs, we're going to go to a commercial break. And when we come back, we'll continue this. This particular commercial break is for the Royal Falcon Foundation. And it's a foundation that I actually personally have started with summer camp programs that try to reach young people with that pure, unconditional love in experiential ways, teaching leadership through experiential means and methods. We have another camp coming up down in Arizona in a few weeks. There are still openings. If anyone wants to know, they can reach out to us. I'm going to go ahead and play this video to show you a little bit about what that's about. And when we come back, we will have more with Roy. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Royal Falcon Foundation. Our curriculum and activities inspire and train adolescents through hands-on experiences, fostering growth and empowerment. Through immersive and challenging experiences, we shape young minds to think independently and develop their leadership skills. Our programs foster new friendships and unity, shaping young leaders to tackle real-world challenges with confidence. We believe in equipping the next generation with the skills to become leaders of tomorrow. Join us at the Royal Falcon Foundation and be part of a journey that empowers, unites, and inspires. Visit our website and embrace a world of possibilities today. RoyalFalconFoundation.com.
And there is that QR code for those who want to learn a little bit more. You can just hold up your phone to it. It'll take you right there, and you can reach out to us. I will also put an email address in the chat. I think, Roy, people must be spellbound because I'm not seeing a lot of chat in the chat. But hopefully we will have some of you check in. Remember, there is or might be the fact that nobody wants my book, which is totally fine. So there's an email address you can reach out to us about anything you hear on the show today. So Roy, right before the break, we were talking about the sign that you have love one for another. So tell us a little bit more then about your journey and your experience as a mental health worker, as a social worker, and how that idea of pure religion has unfolded for you over the course of, did you say 40 years?
Close to 40 years, about 37 years.
Okay, so you got a few more before you reach the Moses level of wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. But hopefully it wasn't a wilderness for you. Hopefully it was enriching and not a desert. Tell us about it.
Oh, it's been a joy. I mean, I would consider the coffee houses as an equal part of outreach, as much as any other outreach you see in the secular industry. Because really what you're doing is you're doing some counseling. We're just talking and understanding people. I believe in that connection of understanding that there is a coming together of souls, and that in that moment there's a change, a growth, And sometimes, for example, I might say, wow, you've been dealing with this, really all your life. And the person would go like, yeah. And you can see in their face, it just relaxes, it changes. And you hear them breathe out that like there's a sigh of relief. And that to me is spirituality. So when it came to the secular work, to me, it was about just zoning in and trying to figure out where people are. Sometimes it's anger. Um, so I worked in psych wards. I worked in homes for people with brain injuries. Then I worked um, in, oh gosh, which came first? Um, I did some church work, which had a lot of secular aspects in it, like some psychology. And then I was a drug and alcohol counselor for 8 years at King Haven in Abbotsford. Um, I had, then I went back to school. I took more courses. I did a degree in education. And all this while, I'm learning about dignity, that people need to be accepted for the decisions that they've made in their life, regarding who they are, their identity. And that's been a big thing in the last 10 to 15 years, especially, that people have decided to say that they're mixed gender or sexual choices and other differences, many differences, not just sexual. It could be a lot of different ways of looking at the world. But hi, I love that you shared that, because to me, that's a very reasonable decision to make. And just as all the other people who make decisions about very important things that concern themselves, as a social worker, an outreach worker, a mental health worker, I congratulate people who share that openly and say, this is who I am. And so, I had to really study stuff, really, and challenge myself. How do I feel about that? Am I okay with that? Can I live with that? Can I help people if I'm thinking, contrary feelings and thoughts? And I really had to get on board, because this is where the world's at. And I'm not going to make up some false fantasy world that, if you join my world, everything's okay. No, this is your world. And I want to visit your world. And I want to know who you are. And I want to look through that window that you're looking through. And I want to see what you see. And I want to feel what you feel. Because that's the only way I can understand. And I could tell you that 100% of the time, every time I could see people through their lens, through their perspective, I saw how beautiful the world looked and how beautiful they were. And so for me, I saw no difference in theology and the secular fields. I see that they are both one and the same, that it's about finding out what their needs are and respecting them for who they are and loving them for who they are. Which is the most beautiful thing you can do to anybody, is to love them for who they are, without any condition. Just,
So,
I mean, we are all made in God's image, right? Everybody. So that's a beautiful thing.
yeah, so we've had a guest on here. We're going to have him again next week, actually. I usually mention this at the end, but a little preview of my plug at the end. Joseph Atman, who wrote the book, The Philosophical War, and he talks about the Garden of Eden. And I love the story of the Garden of Eden, and I love meditating on it. I've spent my whole life meditating on it, what it means, because I love going back to the beginnings. It's one of the reasons why on this show we always have co-host, mostly Dan, take you back to your beginnings and say, where do you come from? What are your earliest memories? You know, that kind of thing. But the point is, when Joe Atman walked through the Garden of Eden story, it came so obviously painfully clear. And I can't say that I'd never thought of this before. Probably I had thought of this many times. I probably even gave sermons on it. But the depth and the richness of the realization, the way he described his philosophical view of the Garden of Eden, is simply this. The story says that God cast them out of the garden, right, and put up an angel with a flaming sword to keep them. But the truth is, when you read the story, they cast themselves out. They hid from God, right? It says when they took the fruit, their eyes were open and they hid from God. And God says, where are you? Right? Because they're hiding from him. And they say, well, we hid because we were naked. He says, who told you you were naked? Right? And so you're describing not looking at anyone's nakedness, not seeing them as naked, not viewing them as naked.
Right. Right.
But helping anyone feel comfortable exposing who they really are.
Yeah. So true.
And it's
Very
that
true.
it's that casting out, right? That and you fast forward to Jesus, you know, and let him that is without sin cast the first stone. And the book of Matthew as a whole, but Matthew 7,
Right.
judge not,
Mhm.
lest ye
Mhm.
be judged, because whatever standard of judgment you use is what's going to be used against you. And I'm no psychologist. You could probably validate this much more and maybe tell stories. But to me, I've always seen that people who are judgmental of others, people who criticize others, who backbite, I mean, they're hurting themselves, because you see
Absolutely.
them applying
Absolutely.
those kind. I mean, sure, you have some people, maybe whatever the term is, narcissist or psychopath, or I don't know, but that they'll judge others and never judge themselves. But generally, you see people applying those judgments to themselves consistently,
Absolutely.
repeatedly, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And if they could stop judging other people, they would then also stop judging themselves.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. I see that everywhere. And I mean, from a more of a scientific point of view, of a psychology point of view, when people suffer from low self-esteem, um, trauma, shame, depression, anxiety, there's, I mean, such a string of different things that can happen to people who have been hurt and traumatized and who are different. Um, that they end up by having this negative view of themselves, and they punish themselves, and it becomes a mirror by which people look at the world. People who are struggling look at the world, and I think that includes just about everybody. Everybody struggles. Everybody's got pain. Everybody is hurting for one reason or another, and they use this image as almost like a mirror to see the world around them. When they see someone doing something that they don't like about themselves, it's like, that person did that, or oh, I don't like that. I mean, they can't quickly make the connection that it's because of um, a low self-esteem, or like a sense of a deficit within. But sure enough, that's where it comes from. And so that's why, for me, I can't blame someone for being upset or judgmental, or lashing out, being cynical, because you know what? I do it myself. When I'm driving my car and someone cuts in front of me, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to tailgate and I'm not going to let anybody do that again. And I'm just going, okay, stop that, back off. Let people do what they want to do. They're going to do it anyway, right? But so a bit of an allegory here, driving, right? Let people be who they are. Don't be part of that anger. Allow them. to come in. I like leave lots of space, but I just say, serve that person. Serve that person. I find that in serving, there's a beautiful reward. It's altruistic. It's okay. It's
Yep.
like, I don't know. I just find that it cuts through the stress I go through. No, I'm going to do something nice.
There's a story in my book, The People of the Sign, which I'll share briefly about exactly this. Maybe it'll want somebody to put a comment in the chat and get this book. So when I was a minister, before I was a minister, when I was studying theology, we had this thing in the Worldwide Church of God, because we kept the Passover. We were kind of weird. We kept more of the Old Testament laws. I won't go into all the theology of it.
Mhm.
We kept the Passover. We did not keep Easter, but we were Christians, and we kept it with the symbols of the New Testament, with the bread and the wine,
Right.
not with a lamb. And but Jesus, the other reason is we did what Jesus told his disciples to do. We didn't do what the church traditionally had told people to do, but we went to the Bible, and so Jesus said, when he bent down and washed the disciples' feet at the Passover dinner,
Mhm.
and then he said, "Do unto others as I have done unto you," speaking about the foot washing. So we did the foot
Yeah.
washing.
Yeah.
And this is actually a really embarrassing story, right? But it shows how deep-seated this thing is. So here I am, recently arrived, and this was the headquarters of our church globally. And we had all these important people, right? These evangelists and stuff that were at headquarters. And they were doing all these great things all around the world. And it was kind of impressive, to the young mind. And you wanted to do well. You wanted to maybe to be seen and connect with somebody who was important. So as I'm going to the foot washing, and we did this, we wash each other's foot. I'm now at the headquarters
That's neat.
church, and I'm wondering whose important feet am I going to get to wash? Which is twisted. It's twisted on
Yes.
so many levels. Because you're supposed to be humbling yourself and serving, and here I am thinking
Yeah.
about, maybe I'll get to wash the feet of an important person. And I was from Alaska, and there's nobody else there from Alaska, right? And then you get there, and you're standing in line, and suddenly I find myself next to this guy from Alaska. And they don't have hillbillies in Alaska. That's a different region of the country. But if they had hillbillies in Alaska, this guy would have been one of them.
Mhm.
And I didn't know him that well, but I completely and totally judged this guy
Mhm. Mhm.
as being a doofus, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And sure enough, whose feet I ended up washing.
Oh my gosh.
But it gets
That's so
better.
good.
This man's name was David, right? And of course,
Oh
King
my God.
David, a man after God's own heart,
Yeah.
right? A man after God's own heart. Why? Because Saul, the prior king, God said, when you were small in your own eyes, that's when I made you king. And of course, then Saul and David was a humble man after God's own heart. He committed all these horrible sins. He was a doofus in many ways.
Yeah.
But he was a man after God's own heart. But here's the clincher. This man's last name was Foot. Sorry,
Wow.
I think he passed away years ago. So, but David Foot, that's the man whose feet I ended up washing. And that, again, you can't make this up. That was my little click click moment, right? That was one of many, many little click moments. That was an answered prayer of God saying, yeah, I'll answer your prayer for you. I didn't actually pray to wash somebody's feet, but I might as well have, because it went through my mind, and I'm like thinking, yeah, maybe I will, I would never have been so bold and obnoxious as to pray, God, please let me wash some important person's feet, right? But I thought it. And that was the click moment for me at that time, the little lesson that I needed from that Passover service. And it struck deep in my heart. It's that objectivity to realize,
Right.
who do you think you are?
Oh God, isn't that true?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing the way God speaks to us.
Indeed. Well, we're going to go to commercial break. When we come back, we're going to bring your nephew back on
Okay.
and take this show, which already should have ended 5 minutes ago, but we just can't stop because it's too good. It's too awesome talking with you, Roy. So we're going to go to commercial break real quick, and when we come back, we'll wrap this up.
Wonderful.
In a world where the battle of minds goes unnoticed, one man dared to challenge the very structure of consciousness itself. Joseph Ottman proudly presents the first part of his groundbreaking collected work, A Philosophical War. Ottman's mission is to expose humanity's most elusive adversary, the structure of its own consciousness. He argues that the modern human condition is plagued by a thought process that inflicts unnecessary suffering. This thought process, like a stealthy enemy, wages war against our nature. Ottman's quest is both daring and revolutionary, to overthrow and replace the current prevailing conscious structure. He identifies the enemy within and seeks a more coherent and powerful ally. With digestible bursts of epistemological guerrilla strikes, he pierces the lines of everyday thought patterns. This counteroffensive offers a new perspective, one that challenges the way we perceive reality. Ottman asserts that humanity's consciousness has relied too heavily on thought alone. He introduces being with, a relationality that harmonizes humanity with the world around us. But the battle doesn't end there. Ottman reinterprets the early chapters of Genesis. He calls for the removal of contemporary notions of God while offering a profound argument for God's existence. Filled with intrigue, simplistic insights, and mystical yet realistic hope, this book is a potential landmark work. A Philosophical War by Joseph Ottman. Available at Amazon.
And there's that QR code. I can attest that this book truly is a revelation. Like I said, it helped me understand the Garden of Eden story in a new light that I had never really deeply comprehended before. Strongly encourage anyone watching to check it out. And let's go ahead and bring Dan back on. I was so enraptured by that video, I forgot to bring him back in. There he is.
Hey guys.
So,
Hey, Dad.
Hey.
Let's put you front and center here, Dan, and I'm sure you've got many thoughts from having watched us, and maybe some questions, and we'll just turn the mic over to you for a moment.
Yeah, thank you. It was wonderful to listen to you, Roy. I very emotionally connected to the way you explained that, and it was wonderful. I wanted to speak a little bit about dignity, and we didn't. I thought the way you had summarized dignity as witnessing somebody's declaration of self, and truly being in that moment, in that space with somebody as they declare their self to you.
Mhm.
It was really beautiful. In fact, the spirit was the breath, which is just so primordial.
Yeah.
This thing. But I want to focus on the idea of dignity. I've had to wrestle with this recently. Not by way of any kind of example, but as a philosopher, I worked with one academic in particular. His name is Robert Hanna. He's written a lot on the Planck's website, and even for myself, he's hard to understand because he's very academic. And how the academic took and frames dignity is very interesting, but the simplicity of how you described dignity, I thought to be better than any academic explanation of dignity. So I want to give you that compliment. It's really interesting. It gives somebody something to build on, as opposed to I find a lot of philosophy, especially academic philosophy, it creates this inward circling questioning of like, most people just don't understand what they're reading. They don't have an intuitive feeling for it. But the simplicity in your words are a great grounding, to use a Heideggerian term,
Mhm.
a great homecoming to return to of emotional felt experience and shared emotional felt experience. So I think that's a great place to start when you're trying to experience what dignity means. Would
Yeah.
you agree with that?
Well, I would. Um, I think that it's all about dignity. That every single human being requires dignity to be able to live their life and to nurture others and to be happy.
Mm.
It's I think about finding yourself and being happy with yourself. Um, some people I think may call it meaning, purpose. Um, but when we look at that triangle, what's I'm trying to think of the name of the person who designed the triangle of needs.
Maslow
Maslow's triangle of
hierarchy.
hierarchy of needs. Right at the top, you see. My memory's not good.
Self-actualization.
Yes, and so what is that? That is being the thing you're most good at and doing it. It's not just discovering what it is, it's practicing. And being able to practice it means that it's validated by other people. And so in that, it fulfills the cycle. I send it out, they send it back, and it's affirming who I am. And that to me is being yourself and loving it and being good at loving it. And there isn't anything more healthy, I think, than that people were attracted to that, you know, because dignity for everybody is different. Because what we do in life and what we're good at is always different. But to find that and then succeed at that and do it, I think that's how I feel about dignity. It's finding yourself and being it.
I think maybe Wade's glancing upwards means he's got something profound to say, but I want to add to this that when I'm evaluating a philosophical definition of dignity from a particular scholar that I work closely with, Robert Hanna, there seems to be a tone or something that runs through his explanation that it's something that we give to somebody, right? You give somebody dignity, and it always feels like an empty vessel because there's so much of what you're describing that is so introspective. There's an acknowledgement, but it has to come from within a person too, right? They may declare it, but you have to be able to listen for it.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that I had anything to say a minute ago, but I do now. And it's just the word namaste, right? And I remember when I was in India in 2014, I was actually there to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award for some things that I had done. And the governor of the state had inaugurated the conferences. It was a series of 5 conferences. And I remember like being up all night preparing my speeches because I I was the keynote speaker from the West on this East meets West thing for 5 days. They had 5 different presentations one was to the media, one was to academia, one was to students, one was to business, and one was open to the general population. And when I was talking to business in particular, I had an experience. I'll go ahead and share the story. I think it's fascinating. It's kind of obtuse, but so previously in my career, I managed outsourcing, and I was for a very large financial services company called Countrywide, whose CEO was put on the cover of Time magazine in January 2019 as the #1 cause of the economic meltdown. And I did strategic planning for them, helping them grow from 30 to 60,000 employees. And I got to ride up and down the elevator with this man, and he was kind of evil. He was just, there was a reason why it was justified that he was on the cover of Time magazine, January 2019. But part of my role was to work with facilities, and also worked with HR and with outsourcing of technology, which I had done with Deloitte. And so we had outsourced the HR service center to India. This is kind of a long story, but stick with it. It's got a big payoff. So we outsourced the HR service center, which means when all these growing employees, these 30, 40, 50,000 employees had complaints, they would call the HR service desk, whatever nature, right? Human resources service desk. And as they were growing, we were actually looking for ways to save money. And this was a mortgage origination company at its heart. And they used to give away Krispy Kreme donuts every month end as the people were working all night, day, weekend, closing the loans before the month end. So they gave Krispy Kreme donuts to everybody. And this was part of the company culture. But as the company grew and there were more and more people not actually involved in mortgage originations, but they were getting the donuts, the cost of the donuts was out of proportion to the original intent and everything. But rather than just saying it was a cost reducing method, these geniuses said, let's launch a health initiative, right? And so they announced that basically the donuts are unhealthy, you fat pigs. And we're gonna, for your own good, we're gonna take the donuts away from you. Now, this would have been more believable had they actually given you an apple, but they didn't do that. And so this is just the first of 2 payoffs of this story. So pretty much the same day, because this was a number of cost-cutting initiatives, and I was part of the strategic planning community that was working all this. So I knew everything that was going on. And it was about the same time they launched the HR service center that they took the donuts away. So now you had all these people in India on their first day at CFC Countrywide in India getting deluged with all these angry complaints from all these people who had just had their donuts taken away and were being bullshitted about it, right? Mm-hmm. And so they had these scripts to read. You do understand the caloric content of a donut, right? And they didn't even know what a donut was. But they're having to explain the company's lie to all these people. And fast forward, I left Countrywide and I moved to the Midwest, and I got a relocation package and I was flying back and forth. And there were some air traffic travels, and this airlines that I wrote a 16-page short story about it, Welcome to Dane County, in which I labeled them UA Hell. And they lost my luggage. And it was a particularly painful loss of luggage because I arrived in the middle of the night and my coat and bag and gloves and mitten and everything were in the luggage. And so was the key to the corporate apartment. And I'm now, and it's 20 below in Madison, and I don't have my luggage. That's a whole nother Oprah. It's a fun story what happened with that. But so I'm on the phone with UAL luggage claim, and lo and behold, they outsourced their luggage complaint department to India, right? So now I'm talking to India and I'm trying to, find out where my luggage is. And the agent on the other end was incredibly sympathetic to my plight, but could do absolutely nothing about it. right? And I knew this because I'd worked in this field and I'm a smart guy. And when you pressed the button for the survey at the end, what you were asked to comment on did the person understand your problem? Was the person polite? Was the
Right.
person nice?
Yeah.
They were incredibly polite. They were
Yes.
they expressed a ton of sympathy.
Yeah.
Now, United Airlines had gone bankrupt, but before they went bankrupt, they destroyed their employees' pension plan and gave them stock instead. So they cashed in the employees' pension plan in exchange for making them owners of a company that then went bankrupt. So they basically stole all the pensions from the employees. And of course, all the employees were furious, right? So the employees were notoriously horrible because they had zero empathy for anybody, not even especially the customers. So my point is this. Countrywide made a mistake because when you outsource something, you need to outsource something that you're not good at. And the things that you're good at, you need to keep those things in-house. A business, if you're really good at something, that's what your core thing is. And if you're not good at something, you outsource that, whether it's your accounts payable department or whatever. Countrywide was really good at BS. They outsourced their BS. That was a bad outsourcing decision. United Airlines was really bad at empathy. They outsourced their empathy, which was a really good decision, right? Because those call center agents in India for Countrywide were paid to BS the employees, but the call center agents for United Airlines were paid to show empathy to the customers.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I'm telling this whole story is because I explained all this when I was in India. And I said to these businessmen, I said, look, you have something that we do not in America. We have all this business expertise. We can grow these massive, large companies because we know how to apply our minds to customer service, right? And good customer service will grow great companies. If you treat your customers right, if you give really good customer service, your company will grow, right? You treat your customers right, they will love you and your company will grow. But it's all, that's what you learn in your MBA programs. And I have an MBA, right? Business 101, right? You measure what you get. That's the first thing. And secondly, provide good products and services to your customers. So the reason people love hiring these people from India is because they have something in the earth that they grew up with, and it's called namaste. Now we're back to this whole thing about dignity. It's in their DNA. What does namaste mean? The light in me salutes the light in you. The spirit in me recognizes the spirit in you. That's how they are trained within their culture. They grow up with this thing. Deeply spiritual nation, deeply spiritual people, which is why the Beatles right behind me here, right? We're so enamored with going to India during that time because they recognize that spirit connection, Roy, that you were talking about. And of course, they were later disillusioned by it, wrote that song, Sexy Sadie. That's a whole nother story as well. But that is what we need more of, is that deep, rich spiritual commitment, one human being to another. So I apologize for my long-winded story and telling my story here at the end. Just to get to that point is that many Christians might judge India, right, as being a Hindu nation or whatever. But the essence and the truth of the spirit of the religion and the principles that Jesus taught or Buddha taught or Krishna taught, we can look around the world and see that love, that spirit, not just in those within our own church walls, but in all those, which is why Paul, not the apostle, but the Beatles sang, when all the broken-hearted people living in the world agree, there will be an answer. Let it be.
Yeah, very, very well spoken.
And Roy, I've just been really enjoying your sharing of these principles tonight. And really exemplifying them in your life's walk and in the way that you approach these topics and share them with us. So
Thank
after
you.
that long monologue, what final words of wisdom or additional thoughts do you have to share with our audience tonight?
Well, that's I mean, that's a wonderful question, and thanks for that. I would just say, love yourselves as God loves you. I mean, we are created in God's image, and I believe that we have God's love in us. And just share that unconditional love. And don't forget to smile.
Well, now I have to share something real quick because you've just inspired me to do so. And this is something called a hidden word from the Baha'i faith. And the hidden words are, you might say that they are the equivalent of the Proverbs, right? In the Bible, really short, pithy statements. But the Proverbs are more practical wisdom in many cases.
Mhm.
And these are
Mhm.
deep, rich spiritual nuggets. And this is the fifth hidden word by Baha'u'llah. O son of being, love me that I may love thee. If thou lovest me not, my love can in no wise reach thee. Know this, O servant. And this just, I had to quote this because it just kind of ties up what you were talking about being a servant and serving others. Also, what, in my view, God did for you when you reached out at age 5 and prayed about that broken camera. You were turning to God in that moment, and he mirrored back. He answered you back. And I think if we're honest with ourselves and open to it and show love in that direction to those things that are spiritual, you said it, love God and love your fellow man. And whether it's love to God or love towards man, our fellow man, that love comes back, and it's reciprocal. It's power. It's synergy. It just works. It just works. So thank you for coming here tonight, re-emphasizing these things, sharing your unique perspective on it. Keep working on that book on prophecy. Even before you get it done, I want to have you back and dig into that topic.
Okay.
That's a whole nother area of rich learning and understanding. And I know your perspective on it will be very unique and valuable.
Well, thank you so much, Wade. And thanks, Danny, for everything that you've said too.
Yeah.
And for the audience, tune in next week. We already played Joseph Atman's video. He will be here next week following up on his last visit, and he'll be talking about concepts and free will. Concepts being really a violation of the second commandment, thou shalt have no graven images, right? You can't really have a concept about God and not have it be false.
That's so true. Yeah.
Right? You can't put God into words. You can maybe talk about some attributes, some aspects of reality,
Mhm.
but we're not capable of really describing God. And the minute we do, we're limiting God in some way. And so Joe Atman's going to unpack that in a lot more detail and also talk about how free will plays into that. And we look very much forward to that. And like I said, Roy, we're going to have you back soon. So everyone, tune in next week. We didn't really have a lot of comments tonight, so I'm just going to hold on to my books, and maybe we'll go in and look at the show once we post it. We often have a lot more viewers after we post it and a lot more comments. So we'll see how that works out. And everyone, good night. And we look forward to seeing you back here next week. Same time, same place, for Created in the Image of God, the Role of Religion in Society. Until then, have a wonderful week.